welcome to Unleashed, the dark art of making ideas happen, the podcast. I'm really happy to talk with you, especially at this time. There's some exciting news that you want to share. So share the news and tell us what you're doing right now.
Well, I guess the exciting news is after a tumultuous year, where we had some extreme highs last January and then some extreme lows throughout the summer, which resulted in the eventual bankruptcy of the company. In August of last year, myself and some colleagues pooled resources together and we were successful in reacquiring the business. So that's the biggest news that we can have, is that after 10 years or 11 years of this venture that we were on at Left, we're back in business. So that's the exciting news for us today.
Congratulations. So Left has had a very interesting kind of journey where it started with travel, then you went into blockchain with RightMesh. Can you tell us, without me kind of articulating, can you tell us about the journey of Left and journey of you as an entrepreneur through Left?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the journey itself, I think, is fascinating. We'll start at 2013, which is sort of 3 years into the journey, as opposed to going back to 2010 when we started, or back into my entrepreneurial journey from sort of 10 years before that. But back in 2013, we were on the edge of bankruptcy as a company. Funny that. We hadn't really known what we were going to work on. We had tried a number of different things in the early years of the company. Myself and my partner, Chris, both had grown up in the internet. Myself as sort of digital marketing background, product marketing. And we had a chance in those first few years to create a new kind of company, we called it. One that was built on cultures and values first, put people at the center. And we realized that if we started with that way, we'll figure out the journey as we went. We'll figure out what we're going to be building. We dabbled in a lot of things in those first few years, but 3 years in, we hadn't really found any product market fit. We hadn't had any success. And out of the blue, we managed to save the business a little bit by selling one of the assets that we were building out. We were building out a lot of generic domain names in the early years of the company. And we built out and sold villa.com and villas.com. On behalf, we are partial owners. We're definitely not full ownership there, but it was enough to save the company. And from there, we said, okay, well, we now have the rest of our lives to figure out what we're going to do. We've managed to save the company. Now what? And we said, well, villa.com, people seem to like that. This is the early days of Airbnb, if you will. And we said, well, people like the travel space. Let's do more of that. It seemed to work the first time. Let's see if we can do it a second time. So we sort of took the resources that we had from the success of that venture and spent the next sort of 6-7 years building a number of different companies underneath Left, growing and iterating each step of the journey. A large part in the travel space. We started a group called Left Travel Inc., which really was a demand generation platform in travel. The profits from that business, because it was sort of putting off cash, the profits of that business went in to build other ventures, including RightMesh, which is our blockchain-based mesh networking technology, and a few other little spin-offs that we've done subsequent. And it was all going great. Along the journey, you have your ups and downs, your peaks and valleys, your roller coaster ride is entrepreneurship. And we'll talk a bit more about the RightMesh journey, I'm sure we will. But the travel side of the business all the way throughout was a thing that would sort of sustain the organization, even into the darkest days of the crypto winter that really sort of crushed a large part of what was RightMesh. The travel side was sustaining, and even to the point that all profits from the travel business would be pumped back into the other parts of their operations. And life was good in January of 2020, and then the pandemic hit. And the business that we had built up over the previous 10 years came crashing to a halt. Wow. So the business of the business is, let's go out and create things that matter. Let's go out and create a project and a company that we wanted to be part of. When we started, we called the company Left, and we tried to do things right. And we're definitely not what we were, but now that we'll be able to build back, we'll be able to build back better.
I'm curious about the last part of the journey where if you own the company, and obviously there might be some things that you want to share or not, but it seems like you built this company where you can create things. what happened? Can you walk us through that? Because not every entrepreneur walks through that. We hear about somebody going, let's say, bust and coming back again, leaving the company. But this is a company that now it seems like went through 2 bankruptcies. Um, what is it like, and what are the core elements of that? Anything that you can share, because it's a very unique. Not every entrepreneur wants to go through that. Obviously, you didn't want to, but you went through it, and you came out now. You're able to build back again. Very, very curious about that journey.
Yeah, I guess. So let me back up even further to answer that question. My first startup was in 1997, 1998, at the edge of the dot-com revolution. We were excited then as far as look what this new technology going to do to go and change the world. You start the first company, it didn't work. You start the second company, you get a little bit of traction, a little bit of angel funding, and then you realize you don't have product market fit, you don't know how to build product, or whatever the reasons are, or you have the dot-com implosion and the business sort of dies from there. Then you just keep on going. And I think what I have sort of learned over the years of starting different companies at different times is that there's different levels of growth. For myself, building a company that can sustain me, that's easy. It's basically being a consultant. I can make enough to feed my family. But the question is, can you grow beyond that? And the question is, how quickly can you grow beyond that? And I think where some of the resiliency has come into what we've discovered is almost in a way that's probably a bit of an antithesis to the Silicon Valley approach of growth at all costs. We don't like that. We like grow to survive. And once you can start to grow a little bit and you can pay for yourself, then you can expand and grow again. And I think that's a bit of a change. And if you look at it from the digital marketing background that I'd come from, it's can you go out and do something that generates revenue, generates profit, and if it works, can you scale it to do it 100 times or 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times? And you find those micro tasks that are profitable and you recreate them. So when you sort of look into the various projects that we've launched over the years, we started off in a way like everybody else. You go and get your first little angel funding and you say, great, we have a company, and you go out and you try to make a go of it. And almost assuredly you would fail, because I don't think I've ever met an entrepreneur who hits it right out of the park on the very first day with the very first project. You build something, you realize what works, what doesn't, you fail, you don't dwell on it, you move on to the next project. And hopefully you have enough cycles in you before you run out of money, is the trick. For us, in that first few years, you take your angel money, you spend through it, and you still don't have product market fit. You better find a way to survive very quickly. So then you bootstrap and you find something that pays the bills. And you take that to that next level higher and say, okay, well, how can we take that type of mindset and build something that A, people want, but B, also pays the bills? And then just keep on iterating on those concepts to some to the theses that you believe in as an entrepreneur.
Interesting.
So it's our approach in a way is, I sat with another entrepreneur the other day who was struggling to find ideas. And I said, what do you mean? Ideas are everywhere. It's so easy to come up with an idea. The hard part is the execution of it. And he said, no, I'm struggling with an idea. And we said, okay, well, let's just, we're sitting on a patio. This is before we were supposed to be isolated at home and not going out to have social drinks outside your bubble. And I said, well, let's just look around. I said, okay, well, Starbucks, there's an umbrella here. There's how many umbrellas there are on this patio? There's 6 umbrellas on this patio. Well, how many different coffee shops would have umbrellas? I personally bought an umbrella this past year. What was my cost? Well, I spent $400 on a patio umbrella. Well, you start to basically unwind. So, well, what do you think you can find a price for on AliExpress for an umbrella? And well, how big is the umbrella market? Let's just guesstimate all these different things. And we started to unpack it to say, well, do you think there's an opportunity to import a container load of umbrellas for patios in the time of COVID when people to go outside? And if so, what's your cost of acquisition? So, well, your keyword cost could be 40 cents and it's going to cost you 1% conversion rate, therefore $40 acquisition cost. And you started to break it out. And he was staring at me like, what the hell are you talking about? But for me, that's easy, because basically in the time, well, actually, we probably don't want to sell the umbrella. We want to turn it into a subscription model where we actually then start to go on down this different tangent. but I wouldn't have even approached that idea unless I had done the very bare bones of assessment of, is there an economy here that could make sense? Then you start to see, well, how big can I scale it? Well, if we can set this up to operate successfully in the Vancouver area, where we have corner of the market and patio umbrellas that you replace every 4 years, or pick your time. Is it, well, do we expand to other markets? Do we franchise? Do you just go on from there and there and
already
there?
You're actually,
and you can sort of go
like,
from there. But and he sort of sits up, like, eyes glazed over a little bit, and says, or what else could we do? Say, oh, look, there's a camper van that just drove by, and said, where does that live all winter long? And it's like there's a huge surge in demand right now for RVs that are out there. The increase in RV traffic has been surging in this COVID time, but where does it stay all winter long? Like, is there a Airbnb for RV parking lots? Maybe there's people who have vacant lots who want to store RVs. I don't know. Maybe there is. I have never done the research. And we start to come up with the markets, and we start to say, what's the economics behind this? And you start to say that. But there's an idea, so we can go off and do that one. Anyway, that's a bit of a random.
Do you find it, I mean, for me, these things are fascinating in the sense that I love to go down the rabbit hole of how to create something. But for other people, yeah, I do find that where some people's eyes like glaze over and like, what the hell you're talking about? Why we're talking about this? And there is that sense, I don't know how many entrepreneurs you met, but there is the sense of starting entrepreneurs that if I find the right idea, everything after it comes, like, lines up. With the right idea, the only reason I'm not able to break through or think like this is because of the right idea. Whereas if you come executed, if an entrepreneur executed anything on any idea, they start thinking that there are all these steps that you need to figure out, and a lot of them need to line up with each other. And because one step can take away everything that you built before. And they realize that, oh, I have to line up all of these things. So I have to think of them. I have to execute, because there's no way to line them up from step number one. So for me, this is fascinating. For others,
yeah, some people find it's scary. That the challenge I often find is I work through, well, and then what happened? Because life is a series of assumptions. If this will happen, then you take this path. If this doesn't happen, you take that path. I think you need to have a bit of an idea of where you want to go, but you have to be willing to change the destination in midstream. It's people used to talk about agile methodology, or building lean and just getting your MVP and getting to market and see what the product says. Yeah, there's some true that, but I think it's being more responsive to the real-time data of what actually is working. People sometimes start businesses, I think, and there is no market there. But it's just because there's no market there in that one small little niche of that market, it doesn't mean that that market can't be extended out to do something else. It's if you look at search traffic for dog walkers in North Vancouver, there's not very many of them. But if you can execute that business model, well, maybe there's a whole bunch of other personal services one could deliver for that type of consumer base. So if you can do that market, can you do other markets from there? You may start off with dog walking in North Vancouver, and the end result is you have an entire business that is personalized services in a peer-to-peer marketplace that is delivering services all across the world. And is there a pathway from dog walking North Vancouver business, small business, to peer-to-peer marketplace? Well, it's not a straight line by any means, but one can make a connection. Well, if you can do this, you can do this, if you can do that, you can do the next step. You just keep on iterating up. And if you can make a successful dog walking business in North Vancouver, you probably can also run, well, the economics would also sustain a true services business that can operate any business from the start to the end. Or at least I think so.
Yeah. So for me, one of the things that resonating is we started Unleashed Ventures. The reason is we were a team and we wanted a playground. We wanted just to a place to we knew that we wanted to build products, and we enjoy the company of each other and building products, but we didn't want every product to become its own company yet, and we didn't know which one's going to stick, but we wanted just that playground where we actually can test and try stuff. Is that kind of how Left started?
Yeah, very, very much so. It's when they said we started off in domain space. Okay, I'll tell you for the full origin story because it's
Yeah,
kind of
go for it.
surreal.
I'd love to.
So I was gainfully employed at an e-commerce company downtown. I was working VP marketing. We had a small business e-commerce product at the time. The company was going to go off in a different direction than what I wanted to go off and see. So what am I going to do? And I was told I had to go out and do massive layoffs in my department and cut my budget in half. I was going to go off a different direction. Like, I don't really like and agree with that. So I called up my friend Chris, who I've known since I did my first startup. I said, Chris, I need to buy you breakfast. I need to run some ideas past you. So I met him for breakfast down at Harbor Center in downtown Vancouver. And we were joking for many years later. I think actually he ended up paying for breakfast. And so I didn't know, I said, I want to buy you breakfast. We think he actually bought the breakfast. And I explained the situation to him. And he says, well, what are you going to do? It's like, I don't know. And I said, well, all I know, this is Chris. He says, I'm going to go to a conference on Monday in Vancouver. It's called Traffic, which is a big domain show that happened to be in Vancouver that year. And he said, hey, I'm going to go to the event. And he said, are you going to go too? And I said, Chris, I can't justify a $3,000 ticket to go to a domain show when I have to go cut $500,000 or whatever the number was for my marketing budget. I just can't justify it. I said, oh yeah, that makes sense. And we'd both been in the domain space before. We both understood the value of high quality generic domain names. And we looked at their the website and realized they have a pitch contest. It's like, if you pitch something, you get it for $800. We should pitch something. So so well, what are we gonna pitch? Like, oh, let's not worry about that. Chris picks up the phone, calls the conference organizer, who he happened to know the organizer of this event, and I said, hey Rick, it's Chris Jensen calling, and do you have room for 2 guys to pitch on Monday? So we know it's short notice. And I said, well, who's two? Well, it's John and I. Yeah, okay, well, what are you looking for? I said, well, we're not actually looking for any money. We just want one really good domain name to work on. And I'm only hearing Chris's half the conversation. He's like, oh, sorry, I misspoke. We want $100,000 for 20% of the company. But okay, yeah, okay, we'll see you on Monday. And we're pitching. What are we going to pitch? And I said, well, I don't know. So, well, we have a few ideas. And one of the ideas that I had was the idea called Left of the Dot. I happen to have at Left of the Dot as my Twitter handle and a few of those other different social handles. And I said, we want to pitch the idea of subdividing the internet. You take a high quality generic domain name and you sell subdomains off of it. So if you had California.com, you would have lawyers.california.com. Or if you have villa.com, which is one of the assets we were working on, you can do orlando.villa.com or tuscany.villa.com. You can start sell those little chunks of virtual real estate. So, okay, let's pitch that. So I went to the company I was with and I said, I'm giving my notice. I'm going to save everybody else's job. I'm going to basically turn myself in and quit. And some of the idea I'd worked on a little bit at that company. I licensed the IP as part of my severance package. We went and Chris took 5 slides. I took 5 slides. We basically made up some stuff. We got together on the Sunday, put our slides decks together, and we had a 1-page website because that's really all we had time for, with a really god-awful logo. And we went up on stage on the Monday and we bullshitted our way in a Dragon's Den style pitch contest. And lo and behold, within sort of 72 hours, we had a check for $100,000 for a company that we kind of made up on the spot. And there's a few other little wrinkles in there, and it's including the fact that I haven't told my wife I had quit my job and started a company and all those different things. So don't do that, other entrepreneurs. And it's a great story to tell at startup events all around. The reality was we basically went down to Vegas and got married for the weekend, because when you find investors like that in those types of environments, you basically are hitched, and you haven't done any proper due diligence, and there's all sorts of long stories there we can regale with another time. But the rationale in starting the company in that way is that we had no idea what we wanted to build. And other than the fact that, well, we had this loose idea, but what we were sort of given almost right off the start was a playground. And you started talking about that entrepreneurial idea, is that we looked at each of these domain names as a playground opportunity, and we would almost in a way would be incubating a dozen different small businesses each one. So we would have importers.com, the early projects we would work on. We had beef.com, looking at a marketplace for cattle ranchers. We had inspection.com, can you connect people looking for home inspection and building inspections with inspectors. And we had all these different ideas, each one being this incubus of an idea. It didn't work. The business model didn't work for many different reasons, but it was that playground. And now I sort of look back at the last 6 months is like we fought like hell to not go into bankruptcy when we did with the COVID, but you pushing through very high revenue numbers, and it crashed down to negative with the cancellations last spring. But as soon as it sort of had collapsed and the bankruptcy was official, it was sort of, okay, well now what? And almost immediately upon the sort of a few days of bankruptcy, I formed a new group and said, okay, we're going to build something again. And it was an exhilarating fall, because for the first time in years, I was building again. I was back in the trenches looking at keyword research to say, is there a market here for this? And should we build one of those? And how about one of these? And what do I believe in? And you can start to create. And that idea of creating is that playground that most entrepreneurs love, that part. You then get into the reality of actually the hard work of actually putting it together, but it's that creation part. That's the fun part. So it's been a great 6 months.
That's awesome. Again. That's awesome. What is it that if you were to ballpark it, how many ideas have you kind of took beyond the idea stage, developed them in some shape or form? Would you? It sounds like a lot, but I'm curious.
40, 50?
Wow.
It's listen, not to put it in a very first idea was a project we called Freeform. This is back in 1997. And I won't go through all of them, but the idea of Freeform really was adware in the early days of Internet Explorer 4. So this is early internet, and we thought we could fill up somebody's form for them online and basically click a button and fill out all your information. And in the process of doing that, we would capture all their personal data. So basically, we were trying to create adware. Didn't think of it as adware at the time, and we saw an early version of Internet Explorer 5, and it had that basically built into the features. So well, that project's dead. The next one was all about, we were the very first add to wish list button on the web. So you see on Amazon right now, you have your wish list and you can add a product to your wish list. We had a wish list gift registry function using this new technology called XML. And people would pitch XML startups like they were pitching blockchain startups 3 years ago. We have a blockchain startup. Well, we had an XML startup back in the day. No, you didn't. You have a startup. And that was all about capturing consumer intent. What does somebody want? And then it's a whole bunch from there to, I had a golf reservations business for a while that did quite well, actually. And then until it didn't, because everything works well when it doesn't, then you change something else. But that was all about, I was trying to book a golf tee time just up from Vancouver at Furry Creek Golf Course. And I'm not sure if you were much of a golfer. I haven't golfed much in recent years. But you go onto the website to book a tee time, and it was a horrific experience. You have to basically find how to book a tee time, and I don't want to talk to someone, I don't want to call up somebody, I want to book it online. And you look across the top menu and you see, okay, well, here's your wedding and catering group, here's your pro shop, here's your restaurant, here's your the 7 or 8 different stakeholders, your property sales, 7 or 8 different stakeholders that would exist off the Furry Creek website, each arguing for that piece of screen real estate for their own little fiefdom. And you had the golf part, this like small little thing in the bottom corner of book a tee time. And so I clicked on it and realized, hey, they use a third-party tool to book golf. I said, well, why don't I just contract with a third-party tool and get all the tee times everywhere? And before you know it, I was able to start buying traffic for people who say, looking for a Furry Creek golf course, click here, they click here, and there's a list of tee times, and they would book. That was cool. I had a product called Direct Voter, which is all about trying to get people to SMS with your MP or your politicians, give them what you want. We had an SMS project for Afghanistan. We had, I don't know. So those are all things even before we started Left. And then when we got Left, it was this playground of businesses. Chris says, partly what I'm looking for is a solution to my ADD to go off and start these companies. And he's probably right about that, is that I would get bored if I was only working on one thing at a time. We had a playground to go off and work on multiple things.
What was the relationship like between you and Chris? Like, what did you handle and stuff? Did you brainstorm together, develop together? What are the strengths? And were there other founders that you worked together?
Chris and I met in the dot-com era. Yeah, we were both working on different startups, and he was always that friend I would go to talk about what was working, what wasn't working. That friend you lean on. His background was more on the operational and the finance side, and more of the operations and grounded in reality side, and the product dreamer ideation over here. And he was much more, John, that's not going to work. I would say, we're going to build this amazing thing. And he says, yeah, here's the reality of actually what we're going to build. So when we sort of started, we used to say that neither of us were technologists, in that we didn't know how to code, but I could write a really good product spec. And so he would sort of take the operational side of the business, I would take the product side of the business. And the very first thing we did when we were starting to look to build the first products back in 2010 was I created a product spec, and it went on to different websites. One was Odesk, now become Upwork. Another one's called Rent-A-Coder, and you basically put these product specs out there and you hire a developer from somewhere in the world. And I put the exact same spec on 2 different platforms, and I hired 2 different developers intentionally for the exact same work. And I said, okay, here's a small project, it's a 2-week project. We just want someone to integrate this. We had an ad feed from Google. We want someone to integrate this ad feed onto this website. I think it was all about attorney comparisons, basically trying to help people find attorney. I don't know, don't remember what the business was. We had one about why not plastic surgery, just to see if we can, way back, just sort of seeing we get this integration working. And when we put the project out there, the developer who was the best was a guy out of Bangladesh. His name was Rakib Islam. And we said, Rakib, this is great. We're going to give you a second project. And we basically put the same project up to 2 people, to Rakib and to a guy. So the first one was Rakib and a guy in India. There was Rakib and Fernando out of Brazil. There was Rakib on project number 3, and a guy in Moldova or somewhere in Eastern Europe. And after that 4th project that Rakib won, because the work was best, his communication skills were wonderful, we said, why don't you work for us full time? So that was in the summer of 2010, about 2 months after we had started, and he was by far the best that we had. And he basically, in a way, became a de facto co-founder, because it was just 3 of us. And we gave him another project. Then he worked for us full time. And a few months later, he said, well, we're getting busier. I have a really good friend. She's great. We should bring her on board as well. So we hired Aisha, also out of Bangladesh. A few months later, we have another good friend. His name's Rashid. We should hire Rashid. So we hired Rashid. And before, a team of 2 was now 5, and then 6. And then it grew up from there. But yeah, so going back to your original question, is I sort of always handle the ideation side. Chris handles the operations side. When we first started Left, he became the CEO. I was the chief marketing officer. We realized the difference was I would get to hire people, but he would have to fire them, because he was the adult in the room. He was 10 years older than me, and he was the one who had already had those tough decisions in his life, and I hated that part of the business. Of course, you have to learn that part and grow from there. And then just sort of recently sort of switched roles as well, where he sort of stepped into the chief operating officer and sort of switched into the CEO role to sort of lead the vision and things going forward. So, so relationship, different delineations, but it's first and foremost, you rely on the person from a friendship and a trust level, and you trust the other person's instinct. If somebody's passionate towards a certain area, you say, okay, let's do it. And you have to have that intrinsic trust for it. And we do.
That's awesome. So you talked about the new latest technology, like it was XML was the blockchain at the time, then blockchain. What drives you guys to go? You hear of a technology, how do you decide to kind of say, hey, this is a technology, offers certain benefits or whatever, let's build on it, let the product here. So how does the idea start? Do you hear the technology first? Do you hear of the benefits? When do you decide to jump on that technology? Because it's not easy, right? It's a new technology. It's hard technically. There's a lot of challenges. It's still new.
I think maybe a better place to start is after we had that near-death experience back in 2013, and we had a chance to assess what we wanted to do. It wasn't just, hey, let's go do travel. It was sort of step back and say, okay, let's assess what's important and where the world is going. and we look at what we call five mega trends. I'm not just sure what's going to happen in the next few years, but what's going to happen over a generation or two. And we identified these 5 trends, and we realized that there's going to be opportunities that exist at the intersection of these trends. So we had rapid urbanization. So basically, people moving to cities in ways that's never been seen before. Rapid urbanization, if you look at a city like Dhaka in Bangladesh, where they're adding 1 million people per year, that's rapid urbanization. You look at the world's megacities and you see what happens in those megacities. Well, what are the outcomes of the rapid urbanization? Are you going to get, you're going to have a massive spike in economic output of those cities. You're going to have massive social problems in those cities. You're going to have transportation issues, but you're also going to have a GDP spike that is that 10 to 20% over time. You're going to have cultural integrations. You're going to have networks that become overloaded, all those different problems attached to it. Then you look at another trend such as, we called it the changing nature of work in an aging workplace, and the idea of what is work. And you define, is what you're doing right now and talking to me, is this work? Well, this is kind of fun. Is driving an Uber work? Is processing a transaction on the blockchain work? Is it work by a person or is it work by a machine? What is work? Aging workplace really goes back, or the aging population really goes back to the generational shift of a good lifespan 30 years ago would be up to 60, and a certain population that still is. And now you basically look and say, we're adding 30 years onto the end of the lifespan. Well, then what happens? Are people going to be working in there when they're 70? Well, you have a consultant who gives advice on TikTok or whatever it would be. You're hanging out in Clubhouse now. Is that work? Are they going to get paid for it? Are they going to get paid in different ways? We looked at trends like the digitization of everything, where we're having a conversation now that we would have had to have had in person. Yeah. And now we can actually do this stuff and have work being delivered over digitization of this medium. You take a photo and you digitize the photo. All those different trends and connectivity people, we basically have this giant mashup of these global trends. And we said that the biggest opportunity will exist at the intersection of these trends. The biggest problems will exist at the intersection, but the biggest opportunities will exist at the intersection. Let's focus on things that really delve in there. And once you sort of focus on that part, you say what technologies will enable some things to happen. Things such as GPT-3. Everybody's talking about the excitement of GPT-3 and the AI knowledge base. Okay, well, that's true, but how's that going to be democratized for the entire world? How's that going to be accessed by somebody in Bangladesh who's working in a farmer's field who wants to know, is it going to rain today? So there's a problem, but the GPT-3 is the solution to the problem of somebody needs to make sure that the crop comes in. So the technologies themselves are always cool, but there's solutions to a problem, and that problem exists at those intersections. Of course, that's where we said, okay, well, we have this problem, let's build something for it. And then the technology is the reason for it. When we got into blockchain, and it wasn't because we wanted to go out and create a blockchain-based solution, it was that we had this mesh technology that connected people in an off-grid environment, and we needed a unique way of identifying people when they didn't have access to the internet. And the engineer said, well, there's a new thing called Ethereum. We think it's kind of cool, but we can use the Ethereum, use this Ethereum thing, which I didn't know anything about, and create this unique identifier, which you can use as an identifier in a mesh network. Sure, sounds cool. Let's do that. Not knowing then that, well, what is the thing? We're like, well, I've heard about Bitcoin. I looked at it back in 2011. Didn't think it was going to become anything. Like, oh, wow, did you look at that? Bitcoin's up to over $1,000. That's crazy. But I didn't see it. Like, people who say, I saw it at the very beginning. No, you didn't. You may have dabbled in it at the beginning. I think I have 3 or 4 hard drives sitting in my house here of things that I may have put stuff on, but I've never got around to look to see if I have a secret stash of Bitcoin on them, because I know I was dabbling around with it. But would I have set up some type of miner? That's the kind of thing I would have done, but I would have quickly done and moved on to a different project. We looked at it when we were first looking at importers.com. I mentioned that brand earlier. Actually, we were wanting a way to facilitate trusted payment from international sellers, imported from China to bring to North America. How do you actually facilitate a transaction? And at the time, because we sort of took over Importers as a brand, and we worked with the owner on that brand. We didn't own the asset, which basically became the property developers of that asset for them. And we kind of coincidentally happened to, when we resurrected the brand, we found the code that was written for the site back in 1998 to through 2006. We found the original code from a guy who was living in China, who was a developer, worked out of Vancouver. We managed to track him down. They used to work on this. I think, I still have a copy of the code. Do you want it? Yes, please. But when we sort of resurrected the site, we instantly started ranking for buy cocaine and import GHB and buying heroin, all these different search phrases we were ranking for, because the marketplace, when it was abandoned in the early days, had a lot of basically free-for-all content just being put on there, people using this platform to buy and sell drugs. And this is really off topic now, but it's
fascinating.
So when we're doing this, we started to look at the search traffic, because well, there's a lot of people who search for import cocaine, and including Special Agent Jones of the FBI, but we were ranking number one. Number two was Silk Road, and if you look at some of the stuff that was going on in Silk Road, and it wasn't actually Silk Road, it was an article in Wired magazine was talking about Silk Road and how they're actually facilitating this. And it's like, well, how are they doing it? Not that I was trying to sell it, but I was looking at the payment mechanisms. So that's when I sort of discovered Bitcoin. But I didn't see it then. I didn't buy any Bitcoin. It was not that smart, because I thought, hey, you know what? Escrow.com is a way better solution than Bitcoin would ever be.
Yeah. And it goes to your point that who said that? He said everything, all the dots connect. I think it's Steve Jobs. All the dots connect looking backwards. Like if you look backwards, like, yeah, exactly, that's how I got here. But while you're at it, it doesn't look like that. And all of these, my friend and I, we were talking about these Bitcoin millionaires who now like say, well, let me sell you a course on how I did it. Well, like you're saying, like you bought something, you didn't know what its value, and now suddenly it increased the value. You didn't do anything. Like it's not like you saw the future.
If you're a genius, you wouldn't be buying wool socks for 5 Bitcoin. Like that's not what it is. So I don't sort of necessarily buy that, but I do think certain people, and perhaps I'm one of them as well, who have the multi-horizon thinking. And in looking over the multiple horizons, what will life be like in X number of years? And if you look at life is going to be, borders are becoming irrelevant. If you're going to say that in the travel sphere, because we've been spending too much time on travel, travel has taken an 80% hit in 2021. Okay, 80% hit, that's back to sort of the 90s levels, in the sort of mid 90s to late 90s. But travel, as far as the market size for international arrivals, has doubled since 2010. It's probably going to double again by 2030. So if you look at the global trend for travel, it's going to have way more travelers in 10 years from now than there are today, which is twice as many as there were 10 years back. That's sort of one of those things that's on a great acceleration. If that's the case, what will life be like? Who's going to travel? Where are they going to stay? When we started getting fascinated by alternative accommodations and the sale or post-sale of villa and the rise of Airbnb, which you look at the future trends and it says, okay, well, based on current traffic expectations, there'll be huge demand for alternative accommodations, because if you get the expected travelers from China alone by 2018, 2019, so it's sort of 6 years in the future from 2013, you're not going to have enough hotel rooms built. So where are they going to stay? So you can start to look ahead in those many steps out there to say, well, if that's going to be life, it's going to be like that. What do we have to build today for the future that you imagine is going to be out there?
Were you always like thinking like that, in the sense that you think in the future, or is it something that you've developed? And where do you kind of go to enhance that kind of thinking?
I guess it's sort of always been innate. Like I'm not sure if you've ever seen any of Marcus Buckingham's strength finders or standout roles, I guess they're now called. But the idea of your strengths is that you have these innate strengths that are with you from that. They can identify as early as 7, 8 years old. And those strengths are things that we all have the unique strengths. But when you identify your strengths, you want to do more of them because you love them. And that's the passion. One of my strengths is input. I love absorbing information and then finding ways to distill it. So when I first did my Strengths Finder back in 2001, maybe 2002, around that time, 2003, I guess, my strengths were strategic, visionary, futuristic, command, and input. So basically my things that I was most fascinated about were things that were looking towards the future. And I was like, well, where's communication? My degree and my vocation is all about communication. How come that's not in the top 5 of my strengths? And I said, no, these are your 5 strengths. And I said, okay, well, that's weird. And then you start thinking about it and realize, well, wait a second, I've always been a good communicator if I'm communicating about my strengths. If you ask me to write a newsletter for a company, oh God, it's pulling teeth, I hate it. But if you want me to write a future prospectus about where I see the future going for this company, I can give you 2,000 words in an hour, just because I love that part. So if I think I sort of have always been attuned to identifying what's coming up, and even now it's attending webinars, and even if you have it on the background, if you you read forums of things you wouldn't normally do, you ask questions of, well, why is that working there? How do they do that? And it's a lot of that exploratory, in a way, scientific discovery. As I said, I'm not a technologist, not a scientist, but I love the scientific discovery of, oh, how does it work like that? And sometimes things take a long time to come to reality, but you always have to be aware of what's happening. What's the role that graphene is going to play in the future? That's going to be awesome. What's the role that cold fusion is going to play in the that's going to be awesome. But then you just have to bring it back and how you can get from those futuristic things down into the everyday life of how does it impact today, and how to go from, if I spend $1, I can make $1.10, or if I spend $1 million, how can I make $1,010,000? And then you sort of look at that, and each of those little milestones here should be able to bring you towards your goal if you are, it's not going to be a straight line, but anyways, it's going to be that weird curvy roll for sure.
Why did you guys, why did you go back and get left? Why didn't you just start another company? I'm curious. Or was there assets that you wanted there as well?
There are assets that we were wanting, but we did. We started a new company. We had a new project. We went out and acquired a new domain name. We had some new ideas. I'm not sure when we'll air this, but it's underneath the concept of room. So VA room. So it's a combination of vacation room, but it's also about acceleration. And the idea that we had is that we're living in this concept of the great acceleration, where you have all these global factors. There's 12 sort of socioeconomic factors combined with 12 environmental factors. They're all kind of stacking on top of each other. And you basically, since the last 50, 60 years, have been in this period of hyper growth throughout society, made those disruptors I was talking about before. And so we started building out the new platform. But at the same time, we're building out this new platform, and we were definitely leveraging some of our knowledge that we took before, but we basically building out a new tech stack, new people stack, new everything. So yes, but doing it this way, it's going to take us about 2 years to get to where we want to go. And so, or we can make a bid for the assets, and if we're successful, we can shortchange that by 2 years, because we know that there's a few assets within that stack that would be valuable to us. It's some of the travel assets that were there were valuable, and that would basically give us a beachhead into what we wanted to do. Some of the mesh assets, we got those too. Are we going to do something with them? I don't know. But there's some ideas that we have there, and really this past sort of 5 days since we sort of learned that we were going to get them in assets back, it's like, okay, well, we've been kind of thinking about those things. If we do get it back, we're not going to assume we get it back. And now it's been, okay, we have it back. And what is this new thing going to look like? How is it going to be structured? Are we going to call it left again? I don't know. We're still working on that part. So maybe when this airs, we'll have made that decision. But right now, we don't know if we'll call ourselves left. We're not sure if we'll call ourselves right. We're thinking of a new direction being up. We'll see where the wind blows.
Interesting. And you said you're working on this concept, VA room, or room you called it. What is it? So the platform, what does it do? So are you still developing that? Is it?
It's still developing. The basics of where the problem and pain that we really really see. And I guess I'll let you in. This is a surprise, great reveal. Maybe who knows when this will air, but maybe the site will be live, maybe it won't be live. It's when we started looking at things in the travel space that so much of what we built for the previous 6 years about what we call a demand generation platform. People search on Google before they begin to travel for where they want to stay, what they want to do, all the different, basically the travel research anticipation phase. And that travel research anticipation phase culminates in the booking of accommodation. That's the starting point of the trip, which is the most high profit part of the entire $2.4 trillion travel market, is that booking accommodation space. And we had built a marketing automation demand generation platform that if somebody searched on Google, we had something in front of them that says, hey, Joe Schmo, we think you want to look for this because you just told us in the search engine that I'm looking for a 3-bedroom vacation rental in Kanapali, Hawaii. And lo and behold, here's an ad that's advertising a 3-bedroom vacation rental in Kanapali, Hawaii. That's exactly what I'm looking for because I'm traveling with my family, and there's ads all talking about that. But we basically had narrow targeted that sort of vertical, bring them to a site, and either bring them off to one of our partners, being Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, bring them somewhere else from that perspective. But it's capturing the consumer intent and matching it up to them. Then we have different segments attached to family travelers, business travelers, luxury travelers, discount travelers, umpteen different personalities. And we basically would have this network of sites that would go there. But for us, it's less about that travel experience and more about why is that person searching for something at that moment in time? What was driving the psychology behind that search, and how can we match them up with what they're wanting to do? So what we're looking at to do with Vroom is a fewfold, but one is there's definitely a trend in the pandemic world to look closer to home. Most of what we're looking at historically was the international search. Vroom is definitely being focused much more on the domestic search. But probably more important than that is there's not a good solution yet on the planet for capturing mobile users at the time that they search and matching them up with things that they can go to or things that they can go and do when they're traveling themselves. So it's a horrible elevator pitch because we haven't practiced it all yet. I wasn't sort of talking about this. So if you imagine that you're searching on your phone, and the very first thing you would do is you come across an ad for Airbnb or an ad for Vrbo, and you click on that ad or an organic listing, and you would go and you have a really bad mobile experience because mobile experiences suck. They really do. The conversion rate is 2% versus 6% on desktop. The economics don't make sense. Yet, that's the start of the journey. Yet the middle of the journey, not necessarily the end, but it's 3/4 way along, is when you're on the trip itself. Your number one travel companion is your phone. You can pick up today and not bring a single thing with you. As long as you bring your phone, you can travel anywhere in the world, you'll be fine. Post-lockdown, or soon we can travel again. Because it's your camera, it's your keys, it's your security device, it's your wallet, it's your concierge, it's your maps, it's the best travel companion that ever existed.
Yeah.
And so you don't leave home without it device, yet the start of the journey is horrible for it. And if you can solve the problem to go from a horrible experience at the start to the essential experience at the end, then there's some magic in between. And what we think we can do is we can make that travel experience awesome on the phone to capture a person along the entire travel journey. Very loosely defined, but if we manage to pull things off, it may start off looking quite similar to what we had, but the end result is that we'll have millions of people traveling better to things that they can do and experience and stay in a much better world. The rationale behind it is one that was sort of definitely uncovered when we were at Left. Is I consider myself a social impact entrepreneur, and the reason behind us getting involved in travel is I think travel is one of the best things that we can do as a species. Because when you travel, you start to understand people, you start to appreciate them more. Walls come down. You break bread with people. If you travel to somebody else's home or country or city or experience sites we've never seen before, you appreciate way more. The understanding between those cultures when you travel, it solves everything. I've had both the pleasure and the misfortune of seeing some sites and different things I've traveled, whether it's the refugee camps on the edge of the Bangladesh-Myanmar border, whether it's extreme poverty or over tourism or various things you see. And those are problems that we also can solve in a way. So how do you actually do all of that and put it into a single product? Probably you can't put it in a single product, but you basically start from here and say, in 10 years from now, we want to be able to solve the world's problems through travel. There's a lot of steps in between from going from here to that eventual goal.
Interesting. So you have
sort of the basics.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm very fascinated with how you develop the idea and how you think about it, which is why I like to kind of let you go into those details. For me, it's fascinating. You've worked on from you said like 50 ideas.
Yeah.
What would be, in your opinion, so for me, it sounds like you have a vision at the start, you see a trend kind of forming that you want to test an idea for it, but how do you move from idea to the first steps of action? Because a lot of people I see get stuck in the idea stage. Like, I have this idea, if only I have the time, if only I have someone who can program it, if only somebody would give me money, everything will be fine. And they stay stuck in the idea stage. What do you use, or what have you seen from your experience that have worked to move just from an idea that, hey, this might work, to taking just the first steps to find out if it works, or kind of, is it worth your time and stuff like that?
It's start with the numbers. You can start on an Excel spreadsheet. I sent some numbers off to a guy, a member of our team this morning, and I said, okay, well, here's an idea. I think we can go from cost of acquisition of here, and therefore, basically, I broke down some numbers there and basically threw out a new idea. But let me go back a bit. When I launched teatimes.net, my golf reservations company, we talked about that with Furry Creek. I didn't say, let's go off and build a giant golf reservations platform that's going to take over the world. I didn't build that. I said, okay, well, I have this problem. What can I do? And I said, well, let's see if people are searching for golf. I know I just searched for golf, but are there other people like me? My HTML skills were crap, but it could launch a one-page website, and it was just a ground under repair. Basically, I can do an image file on an HTML website. This is pre-WordPress, really. It's getting off the ground, so now it'd be to spin up a WordPress site. But I launched a one-page website, no content on the website, and I placed an ad on Google, and it basically tried to see if people were searching for golf in Surrey, BC. And somebody did. Okay, well, on the first day, I had 5 people who searched and clicked on my ad. My total cost was $1 because it cost me 20 cents to get each of those clicks. Okay, people searching. If I had that many people searching, well, then what would happen? So I took that one-page website and said, okay, I know people are going to search for it. And you do some quick math, and these people each cost me 20 cents per. Okay, well, what do I think I could get from commission on a round of golf? I said, well, let's say that a person is going to spend $60, $70, have a party of 2, we'll call it $120 total for 2 people on a round of golf, 20 cents to get 1 person interested. Usually work the math and say, well, what would my conversion rate be on an e-commerce transaction? And that's sort of, if you can get that 1 to 3%, it's probably pretty good business. Let's assume it's going to be really bad at 1% conversion rate. And if it's 1% conversion rate at 20 cents a click, it's going to sort of, you can basically work that. It's going to cost me $20 to get that 1 person to take an action. Can I make $20 on a commission around of golf? It's like, might be hard in that very first time. Well, what if we can get 2%? Well, then it's going to cost me $10. Well, $10, you probably can make money on that. So I went out and I found a third-party tool, a white label product, and I said, okay, I want to basically license your tool set. It was $1,000 licensing fee for their tool set, and I basically bought traffic from my, like I took their tool set, put it behind a subdomain, and dropped Google Analytics on it because I wanted to see what the numbers were going to tell me, and I bought traffic from that location straight to the subdomain and said, okay, what's the traffic going to do? And I had a sort of my one-page website, a little bit better, still only a one page of depth to it, not really anything. Dropped some analytics on, and I said, okay, I launched it, had my first campaign going for Prince Edward Island, and it was looking at golf and PEI. And this is 2008, I guess. And I was working from home then as well, and I went upstairs to said to my wife, okay, the business is launched. And because now she's so patient. She's such a wonderful woman, so patient with me. And I said, business is launched. And I said, oh, look, I have somebody who's clicked on my ad because you basically watched the real time. Oh, this is great. Well, they're looking for golf. Okay. They're on the conversion page. Holy shit, they checked out. My conversion rate was 100%. And it's like 20 cents. And my commission on the first one was 4 people rather than 2 people. 4 people, and I was like $110 a round. So my commission was like 8% of that, and also I had made, I think, $44 and spending 20 cents. That's just a marketing gold mine. This is amazing. And it's like, and she rolls her eyes at me, of course, because she's been through that many times. But that starting point was the math. Yeah. Can I spend 20 cents and get a person to take an action, and therefore what's my numbers attached to this? I wasn't worried about lifetime value of those customers. I wasn't worried about anything. I didn't look at server costs. I can get a person for 20 cents. They can take an action and they get my return on here. Second person came onto the website within about 2 minutes later, and they didn't book. And I was like, they didn't. I was ejected. My conversion rate was 100. Yeah, it's down to 50%. This is horrible. Third person came on and they booked again. I went back up again. It's like, oh, right, this is awesome. And then I went about 200 people before I had my next conversion. So the way the math works is that if you have a 1% conversion rate, it could be the first person or the 100th person. So don't make early judgments off of that, but it can start to, once you can, but the moment I had that person book, I knew it was technically possible to get a person to book golf online. My minimum viable product, which is really just an ugly one-page website and a $1,000 experiment of this white label product, had paid for itself. Then you go and you scattershot it out and go from there. It's not much different than what we're doing in any other product that you sort of try. Is that can I get one person to take an action and prove one assumption? Are the people searching for dog walkers in North Vancouver, as we were saying before? Sometimes those assumptions don't even have to be taken by yourself. You can just look at the numbers and say, hey, look, there's this many people who are doing this on an average day basis by looking at Google Trends. You can start to then make numbers up. You can build your entire business off of a spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be right, but it has to be a starting point, and you can sort of tweak your models when you actually have the data to support what your assumptions are.
That's awesome. Thanks, John. This is fascinating for me. I can talk about these things for hours. A lot. Even you raised a lot of questions. I would love to dive into these kind of things, and there's a lot of learning. One of the things that I want to finish on, because I can't believe we've been talking for an hour. Honestly,
that's crazy.
What is it? If you look back, 3 key learnings from this fascinating journey and all of these things that you've done, if you were to distill them, like, here are 3 key learnings that are the top key learnings from your journey, what would those be?
When we set up with Left, we started with 10 core values. And I think those 10 core values are holding true. We only changed one of those values over the course of that journey. And we used to have a value described as, quoting Yoda, try or try not. There is no do, try or try not. Basically,
do or do not.
Whatever, do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we realized that's wrong. And that's not our core value. Our core value is failure as an option. And because if you don't try something, if you don't risk failure, you'll never succeed on the other side as well. And when you do fail, don't begrudge it. don't, oh geez, life is horrible and this is pointless. It's not worth it. Just move on to the next thing. You use it as a learning experience. Move on to the next one. So that's definitely one learning thing, is that failure is definitely an option. I think the other part for me that is life is too short not to have fun and enjoy what you're doing. It doesn't have to. Don't always chase. In a way, the best way to put it is that people will often make sacrifices to appease that Silicon Valley VC approach of growth is your only thing. Well, that's bullshit. Find something that you enjoy. If it makes you happy, and if it makes for your family happy, and you've created a lifestyle business, then that's not a pejorative term by any means. If you create something that creates joy in you, do more of that. And this last 6 months could have been horrible for us. It's been awesome. I've been able to be healthier and enjoy life and create again. And that's you shouldn't lose sight of that. Sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that. And you got to take things too personally, and you basically wrap up your entire identity attached to it. You have to take a pause and look up and relax. And I guess that third piece of advice or first lesson is that don't do it alone. I would not have been able to be on this journey if it wasn't for the team we assembled along the way, whether it was Chris, whether it was Rakib in Bangladesh, whether it was my wife. There are people around you who want to support you and help you. Take their advice, take their opinions, and share it with them. Because if you do succeed, it's awfully lonely if you've done it by yourself. And if you are embracing failure, you want to say, geez, we really screwed up that one. And then you can correct it together and move on to the next thing. So don't do it alone is a big piece of advice.
Fascinating. Thank you very much, John. The second one, I articulated exactly as is like life is too short not to have fun. Absolutely. Thank you very much for taking the time. I've had a blast. Really good nuggets of, you reminded me of great things that I do, but sometimes don't take them for granted or don't do as much. There are some things that I kind of forgotten about. There's a lot of learnings. Thank you very much, John. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, my pleasure. I love talking about this and tell stories, and I can tell them anytime. So happy to do it again if you want, or maybe you find this boring, think well, these crazy shit and actually talk to them ever again. But either way, let's chat again soon.
I love crazy shit. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really enjoyed it.